Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I am here today at the Cody Firearms Museum in the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, and today we are taking a look at a number of the shotguns that they have in their collection, specifically Liberator shotguns. This is a pretty unusual, they're actually fairly simple, they just look really kind of outlandish and sci-fi looking. What we have here is a 4-barrel, basically a shotgun Derringer. Multi-barrel Derringer. These guns were the brainchild of a guy named Robert Hillberg, who is one of the U.S.'s less recognized firearms designers. Definitely deserves more recognition than he actually gets. He was born in 1917. He actually just died a few years ago in 2012. And over the course of his career, he did a whole bunch of different stuff. The notable highlights would be his time as director of R&D for High Standard. He was also responsible for the four-barrel Colt Defender, which maybe isn't the greatest gun ever to be known for, although it has a lot to do with these. He also designed the Whitney Wolverine, 22 automatic, very cool gun. And what else? He was involved, the Wildie, gas-operated 45 caliber Magnum automatic pistol was also his design. So the guy knew what he was doing, and in 1962 he came up with this idea for this, the Liberator shotgun. The concept, actually, this is a wooden mock-up that they have here of the original concept. The idea was a 4-barrel, 16-gauge, or actually the very first ones were 20-gauge, shotgun with a single trigger. And in fact, these first ones were fed with a single packet of ammunition, 4 rounds that we drop in. And it was supposed to be a very cheap, basically like a Liberator pistol from World War II, something you could make in large quantities, drop to places behind enemy lines, so to speak. It was intended for counterinsurgency type roles. The two places that really come to mind for the original development of the Liberator were Vietnam and Cuba. So Hillberg kind of marketed this idea around. Winchester was interested, and DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, actually kind of pushed this idea. They promoted it. They suggested that maybe this would be a good thing to work on. So the concept, when Winchester got their hands on it, was a gun like this could be made for about 20 bucks. It would all be made of castings and very simple to use. You can see on this wooden mock-up that it has a big squeeze lever trigger, rudimentary sights. They did some testing with the early guns and found that at 30 yards you could get 3 to 5 buckshot pellets on a human-sized target regularly, without much trouble, without much expertise. So this was a way to arm a large number of people for a very low cost. And the design evolved. So why don't we bring the camera in closer. Let's start with the wooden mock-up, which is a Mark I, and we'll take a look at a Mark II, and we'll take a look at some Mark IIIs, and see where this project went. So this is the closest thing that I have available to an existing Mark I Liberator. This is a wooden mock-up. It's 100% scale, kind of gives you the idea of what was intended. Really, the most notable feature of the Mark I was that it used a proprietary ammo packet sort of thing. The idea was to have 4 shells. You can see that this is a diamond-shaped cluster of barrels, and they had a single packet of 4 rounds of ammunition that you would put in. I think the idea was you would put it in on this side. You then had 4 shots, and then you would eject the thing as a single unit. Somehow one of these would have been a button to eject the ammunition. When Winchester started working on the development of the Liberator, they decided that there were too many problems with that. Trying to manufacture the ammunition so that all 4 rounds were properly aligned with the barrels, that was a problem. The ammo was heavy and cumbersome in these 4-round packets, and it just wasn't working well. So one of the things that they changed was that. Now, this was also designed to be made all of castings, which, well, you can't quite see that on a wood mock-up, but from the shape you can sort of get that idea. It was modern casting technology in the early 60s that was going to allow this to be a very affordable weapon for Winchester to make. They estimated cost on these to be at about 20 bucks a piece. So when Winchester really got going, they actually produced not the Mark I, but the Mark II. And here we have an example of a Mark II Liberator. Now, this is made of all castings. It's a 4-barrel cluster, like that. The casting itself is made of magnesium. there are a number of steel inserts, mostly notably in the barrels, to give them the extra strength necessary for withstanding firing pressure. This comes with a collapsing shoulder stock, which is probably the least comfortable stock ever envisioned by humankind. And that has a button right here on the side. I can push that in and remove the stock, very much like a grease gun stock. And then for storage, it actually sits on the front. It slides into another pair of recesses right there. We have a similar button right here on this side. Push that down. I can lock the stock in place there on the front. So it does actually stow nicely out of the way. We still have this big squeeze trigger, and there is a rotating piece inside that fires each of the 4 barrels in sequence. This is held shut by a large latch. So there's what the inside looks like. There is a round extractor here, and that's just spring-loaded, just like so. So it compresses down when you close the gun. When you open the gun, it pulls the cases out slightly, and then you would have to dump them out, load 4 new cartridges in, locking lugs up here, your steel locking bar there. Actually, similar to a Webley pistol there. Front and rear grip, not a whole lot to be said about this thing, really. It's got a very simple sight up there, really intended more for firing from the hip than firing aimed. One other feature here, it has this trigger guard, but if you happen to be wearing heavy gloves or it's cold, that simply rotates up out of the way. There's a spring-loaded plunger right up here that puts a little bit of pressure on it so that it snaps into place and kind of stays there, whether it's up or down. Now, problems with this gun. When Winchester tried to start putting these into serious production, they did run into a couple of issues. Probably the most significant of them being they had a hard time getting all the barrels properly lined up and regulated. Setting the steel inserts. In fact, if we get a close-up on this, you can see the steel insert inside the casting there. Getting those all set in the proper orientation and held in place while you then cover this whole thing with molten magnesium and cast the final shape, that was problematic, and it turned out they were having trouble getting them in at as low of a cost as they really wanted. Now, they had also gone to standard ammunition. In theory, according to everything you see written, these Mark II guns were in 16 gauge, something a little bit less powerful than 12 because this is not necessarily a pleasant gun to shoot. However, when I actually measured the bore of this, I got approximately 0.68 inch, which is kind of in line for 14 gauge. I haven't found any original documentation on these. I can't say for sure exactly what the purpose was. My suspicion is kind of that this isn't the strongest lockup ever done, and they may have wanted to make sure that people didn't try and stuff Magnum type ammunition into the chambers and blow the gun open, and decided to make their own proprietary, slightly smaller than 12 gauge cartridge in order to do that. But like I said, I can't prove it. It's just a supposition on my part. Now, because of the issues with the manufacturer, when they eventually actually moved on to a Mark III gun, which was a little bit easier to make. Now, we actually have 2 different examples of the Mark III here that are differentiated primarily by their opening mechanism. But the main change here, they kept a casting for the back half of the gun, but they changed the lockup method, and more significantly, they changed the barrels. The barrels are now 4 simple steel tubes that are held together by a stamped plate at the front. This was much easier for them to fabricate on existing tooling at a relatively low cost. Worked a lot better for them than casting the whole barrel assembly. So that was replaced. Now, according again to the literature, the Mark III guns, in an effort to broaden their appeal to potential police or paramilitary buyers, they changed these to 12 gauge. Again, according to the literature. The idea, in theory, was that 12 gauge ammo is actually much more available. All sorts of different types of normal and specialty ammunition could be acquired for them. So, however, on the 3 examples that we have here of Mark III guns, all 3 of them mic out at the same bore diameter, approximately 0.68 inch. So I can't explain it. Unfortunately, I don't have any 12 or 16 gauge snap caps here to test the chambers, but it appears to me that they are in fact not 12 gauge, they're a slightly smaller proprietary shotgun size. Now, a couple other things. Let's take a closer look at this guy. So to open this up, we're going to push the lever down and then pop that open. This has a much stronger extractor. This would probably function as an ejector. I suspect these shells would come zinging out when you open that up. Now, breaking open the action like this doesn't do anything else except eject the shells that are in there. This is not like a typical double barrel gun where you've got two hammers that are cocked when you open the gun. Instead, this kind of functions like a double action revolver. Now, this separate model, this is still a Mark III, differs a bit in that instead of having the brake lever on the side, this has a big tab on the top for opening. I have no idea which came first. Honestly, I'm not sure which was standardized. This gun is marked B. The other one was numbered 18. They never made all that many of these because they never managed to get any actual military contracts. However, I can show you the firing mechanism in the back. So what you're seeing in there is a cloverleaf cluster of 4 firing pins. Those are all kind of at angles, and each one of those firing pins goes out to one of the firing chambers, one of the barrels. Now the hammer, you can see, has a protrusion on it right there. The face of the hammer actually has this 4-position ratcheting, well, hammer really, so that every time you fire the gun, recock it. Now we're on the top right barrel, hits that firing pin, recock it. Now it's on the top left barrel, drop it, fire that one, open it back up. Now it's on the bottom left barrel, and so on. So the gun fires progressively. It doesn't matter what position that firing pin is in when you first load the gun or first fire it. It will simply travel around the cluster of barrels and fire each one of them in sequence. Now, because you can see in there, you could, in theory, choose which barrel you want to fire. You could hand cycle it like I was doing, or if you really had the memory for it, you could try and make sure that you had it set to a specific chamber and load the 4 chambers with different types of ammunition. I don't think that would be practical. I don't think it was really intended, but in theory you could do it. The intention of this gun was to load all 4 with the same type of ammo and blast it without needing a whole lot of training. You can see the sights for this are pretty huge and not exactly precision sights, even by shotgun standards. So here's our final example of the Mark III. This one, as it says right there on the side, is a test gun. Same basic layout. Now they've changed the locking latch again to be this push-down tab. The rest of the gun is pretty much the same though. It does have this interesting kind of ivory-colored plastic front grip. Today, this would have been 3D printed. This looks like it was carved out of a block of some sort of plastic instead. The trigger guard is gone, has been replaced with a 2-finger trigger. Not sure exactly what they were trying to test on this one, but it may have been that, among other things. Now at this point, when they got to the Mark III, the military contracts weren't really forthcoming. Nothing had been gotten there. Winchester wanted to try and expand this to police contracts. They actually put out some advertising, which you can still find reproduced today. And they talked about this being, kind of a gun good for anything. This could be a pilot survival gun. This could be a ground, just a survivalist's kind of survival gun. This could be used for prison guards. It could be used for paramilitary forces. It could be used for counterinsurgency, like the original intent. Really, they were kind of just shotgunning it, so to speak, and trying to appeal to absolutely anything that might work with a gun like this. They advertised ammunition made for these. Now, whether, like I said, these all seem to be non-standard sized bores, so whether that's a weird artifact of these pre-production guns, which it might be, or if they were making literal specialty ammo, what you do see in the advertisements are buckshot, slug, tear gas rounds, flare rounds, and incendiary rounds were all offered. Whether they were ever sold, I don't know. Probably not. Certainly not in any significant quantity. Obviously, these are all NFA guns. The barrel length on these is 13.5 inches, including the chamber back here. So they were not marketing them to civilians, but they were trying to market them to every conceivable sort of official agency. It was 1965 when these Mark III guns were being made and advertised, and they didn't last a whole lot longer than that. Without any orders coming in, Winchester dropped this project, and that was the end of it for the Winchester Liberator. So after Winchester gave up and threw in the towel on this project, Hillberg continued to shop it around, and he ended up taking the idea to Colt. And Colt developed it briefly under the name of the Defender. What they came up with was actually an 8-barreled gun in 20 gauge, and they were also similarly unable to find any actual interest in purchasing the gun. So they built one example, maybe a couple examples, certainly not very many, and then they scrapped the idea as well. And ultimately what we're left with was a few of the Colt Defenders, a small handful of Winchester Liberators, and not a whole lot else. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. I would like to thank the Cody Firearms Museum for giving me the opportunity to take a look at these very cool examples. And if you ever have the opportunity, I would highly recommend coming up here to Cody and checking out the Firearms Museum. It is one of the best in the country, if not the world. Thanks for watching.